BoJack Horseman is a comedy show following main characters of the show and how their lives are affected by their own childhood trauma. It is one of my favorite shows. I've watched it at least 7 times over and enjoy it more with each viewing. BoJack has such a detailed plot and cast that it's easy to forget events that happen from season to season, making it perfect for a rewatch. But it's not a show for everyone, as it deals with very dark subject matters, such as overdosing, suicide, and addiction. One important point in the series is reflecting back on characters' childhoods and how it affected them growing up, and how it still affects them to this day. Starting with the most obvious character, the main character, BoJack. He had a rough childhood. Rough isn't even the right word. BoJack was a product of what you would call a one-night stand, with 2 parents who didn't want him. Those parents in return took out their regrets and anger on their child, insulting BoJack and treating him like a nuisance. There were a few core moments that BoJack internalizes from his parents. 1. The lollipop song.
Nobody gives a damn what you feel. You've got an audience out there, and they want to hear you sing. Now, you want your mommy to love you. You go out there, and you do the only thing you're good for, which is singing that goddamn lollipop song.
This exchange covers a few important points in BoJack's personality, the primary one being the show must go on trait. BoJack feels like the only thing he is good for is acting, being in the eye of the public, which is expressed throughout the show and most obvious in the episode, The Showstopper, where Gina sings "Don't Stop Dancing Until the Curtain Falls." It is also important to note the song makes a return in The View from Halfway Down, where Sarah Lynn sings this version. It being present in BoJack's darkest moments shows how important the message is in his mind. Without having that train of thought, it's very possible BoJack would have stopped acting sooner. 2. Causing damage and making up for it. As said before, Beatrice believes it's BoJack's fault for being born. We don't even have to read in between the lines for this one, as she says it herself.
You ruined me, BoJack.
I know.
You better grow up to be something great, to make up for all the damage you've done.
I will.
It's one of BoJack's main motives to strive to be famous, aside from being attention-starved. If BoJack is famous, his name is known. Then it will be worth it. What he went through, what his mother went through, what his father went through, it will all be worth it. But if he fails, what was the point of all of it? Ironically, he succeeds, but doesn't feel fulfilled. That's because the meaning of life is the friendships you form. And unfortunately, BoJack tainted every one of his meaningful friendships and relationships in general. 3. You can't do anything about birthrights.
We're born broken. That's your birthright.
BoJack always knew he was broken. He knew that he had trouble finding happiness. But this moment here really brought out what he ingrained in himself. He was broken by birth, and no matter what he did, he would remain broken. This line of thinking led BoJack down the dark paths of drug use, trying to find some way to cope, some way to manage his dark thoughts. But drugs are just a temporary solution and never good in the end. They led BoJack to having outbursts and hurting those he loved and digging himself a deeper hole. Along the way, BoJack hurt many people, but he never really thought to apologize. In his mind, why should he? He's already broken. Doing something he doesn't want to do wouldn't fix that. And besides, he's the one with the messed up life from his parents. It's not his fault, it's theirs. They should be the ones to apologize, not him. While we, the audience, know that's wrong, it's how his mind works due to the words he's internalized over the years. Todd Chavez, one of the kindest characters in the series. While his childhood was not as bad as BoJack's, he still did harbor some emotions from his parents. His stepfather was what you could call harsh towards Todd, even though he did it out of care, wanting to prepare Todd for the world. Todd saw it as him hating him. And even though Todd being kicked out was for being addicted to a video game, he saw it as the last push of his parents wanting to get rid of him. When he was invited to stay with BoJack, he thought for the first time someone wanted him around. Of course he jumps at that opportunity, but as we all know, it was a toxic relationship. But Todd stayed because who else wanted him? As the show went on, Todd met more people that did want him around and enjoyed his company, which finally gave him enough strength to leave BoJack. But because of the fear of being unwanted, he stayed longer than he should have. Moving on to one of my favorite characters, Diane. Diane was the black sheep of her family, and the point of contention, not just from her siblings, but from her parents as well. She didn't even have a break at school as she was bullied there as well, as Diane described her father.
He was a mean, sadistic alcoholic who never supported anything I did and actively delighted in seeing me fail.
One of the most noticeable incidents is the Cryan video, where her brothers wrote fake pen pal letters to her, and even hired a fake man to pretend to be her pen pal, where she then, understandably, breaks into tears. This moment is captured on video, and is to be played whenever the family feels like laughing at her. For her whole childhood, she is diminished, and even is in her adult life by her mother. Because of that, she sees herself as worthless, which is best shown in Good Damage, where she talks about the events that affected her, including the bullying at school. This is a mental fight Diane has for the majority of the show, and is especially expressed during her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter. The reason Diane falls for him is simply he's nice to her. One of the first to be, in fact. It shows how much she craved positive attention that has been withheld from her until now. But being married to him does not fix her issues, which makes her feel worse. She's with a great guy, why isn't that enough to be happy? And truth be told, their relationship wasn't good for either of them. It only amplified Diane's issues. Regardless, Diane is a good example of getting help for your problems. Unlike BoJack, who chooses to wallow in unhealthy drugs, Diane goes to therapy and gets on antidepressants. While they are not a magical instant fix, they are a good start to living a better life and trying to conquer the trauma she holds within her. Speaking of Mr. Peanut Butter, you might be thinking, what trauma does he have? Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it trauma. There are parts of his childhood that did affect his behavior. Mr. Peanut Butter was extremely sheltered as a child, so much that he didn't know his parents were dead until adulthood. He was still under the belief they were sent to a farm. Due to this, he has a hard time handling bad news and giving bad news. This is most obvious with his girlfriend Pickles. Mr. Peanut Butter cheats on Pickles with Diane. At first, he tries to convince Diane to tell Pickles for him, which is already crossing a line. After he fails at that, he decides to tell Pickles on his own. But as we all know, he can't do it. Instead, he doubles down and proposes to her, and intends on marrying her while he's still lying. Even after the truth comes out about the affair, Mr. Peanut Butter has trouble accepting the relationship is over, and encourages Pickles to cheat on him in return. No matter which way you cut it, him being sheltered had an effect on him in his adult life. Now for one of the most interesting characters of the show, Princess Carolyn. We learn that she was forced to grow up rather quickly due to her mother being a drunk. She took over her mother's job so they could stay afloat, and one day she discovered she was pregnant. Her mother saw this as a golden opportunity to be set for life, as the father was from a rich family. Sadly, she miscarried, which would be a recurring problem in her life. This deeply affected her. She believed she was made to have children, and she was failing at her one task. It was not helped by her mother being angry at her for the miscarriage. These events left her with two important traits of her character: motherly and independent. Motherly might be weird to hear at first, but if you examine what her job is, it makes more sense. As an agent, it's her job to take care of clients and their projects, and she takes that job very seriously, especially when it comes to BoJack. She is always there to help him, as if a mother would help their child. But because of this, she doesn't put her own feelings and mental health first. Helping others always comes at a cost to her, and isn't worked on until season 6, where she starts to separate work from her personal life. The perfect metaphor for that is her 2 weddings, one for her close friends, the other for the press. She works with both of them, but now they are separate. I believe the biggest cases of her craving to be independent and insisting on doing things on her own involve Ralph Stilton. One of her most serious relationships. When she has trouble getting pregnant, he suggests getting help from doctors or adopting. And she does not react well to that at all, which ultimately results in their breakup. The second instance is when Ralph drives Princess Carolyn to the hospital to pick up a baby she is going to adopt, where the two proceed to get into an argument.
You don't need to do this by yourself.
I never needed to. I want to.
While raising a child on your own is not a bad thing, it's just an event that displays her need to do things on her own, as she had her whole life. Despite having different types of childhoods and trauma, all 5 characters are affected by them, some worse than others, some seeking help and some not. BoJack Horseman is a show that can display them in subtle ways, and is the perfect embodiment of show, don't tell, which is one of the reasons I adore the show so much and always will.